Hello, friend. Thanks for joining me for another book chat. Today, let's spend some time with The Path of Daggers, a work of fantasy by Robert Jordan that was originally published back in 1998. I've been reading my way through this series, the Wheel of Time fantasy series, and like I said, this one is book 8. I will link to the chats for the previous 7 down in the details below. But this series is one of those book series that you need to read in order. It's really one big story. So, some series you can kind of pick up a book here and there and it doesn't matter so much, but this one you do need to read in order. So by the time we're here in book 8, we have actually progressed pretty far in our story, needless to say. So it becomes a bit of a challenge to chat about a book like The Path of Daggers. So I am going to give it a go, though, and it is going to be a spoiler-free chat. So I will not be giving anything away that I think would detract from a first-time reader's experience with either this book or this series in general. So one of the most interesting things about this book and this series in general is the gendered use of the one power. So this world does have a magic in it. It can be called magic, a power, and men and women access this power differently. So to me, that's really one of the most interesting parts about this series. So men and women access the one power differently, as I mentioned, and men have not been able to access the power actually safely for about 3,000 years in this world, although all that is changing now with the prophecy of the dragon reborn. The dragon has been reborn, and it's the coming of a man, a male, who can wield the one power, the male half of the one power, and that will ultimately change the world. And so that's the whole story arc of the whole series so far. These core characters, the Dragon Reborn, Rand, and those that he has surrounded himself with, who support him in fighting the forces of darkness. Or rather, I should say the Dragon Reborn is himself not only fighting the forces of darkness, but the forces of those around him who would seek to control him and his power to their own ends. And so this book in particular really showcased this sort of political intrigue because there are multiple kingdoms with different types of government and different types of customs, and they all are working. Some of them are working more on the Dragon Reborn's behalf than others. There's also other organizations like the Aes Sedai, a group of women who wield the one power, the feminine side of the one power, and some other forces like the White Cloaks, which are sort of a religious sect. So anyway, there's a lot of forces sort of at work. At one time I counted when I was reading the book, and I believe there's at least 6 different conspiracies of groups of people seeking to manipulate Rand, the Dragon Reborn, in one way or another. So that was really the main essence, I think, of this particular book, was working our ways through some of that intrigue, although there's quite a lot of action also in this book. So like I said, I'm not going to give away any spoilers, so I don't really want to talk too much about what happens in the book, because at this point in the book, talking about anything that happens is kind of a spoiler if you haven't read the previous books, right? I won't talk about the book in details anymore as far as that goes. But I thought what I would do for this chat really is just pull out some of the more interesting and fun things that I had in reading this book. So if you've seen some of the previous chats about the Wheel of Time series, you might have heard that I'm buddy reading this with my coworker Aneth. And so as we have been reading the book, we have noticed over the last several books that Robert Jordan has this tendency when he's describing, especially women, when he's describing women who are fidgeting or about to get huffy, they will rearrange their clothing in some way. In this particular book, there's a couple of instances where men also do this with their clothing, with their caps or their buttons. But for the most part, this is a signal of women in some sort of state of agitation. And so what I decided to do for this particular book is when I was reading the book to actually keep track of the clothing adjustments that were done, and here is the list. The whole list throughout the whole book. So the totals, though, just in case you're interested, which you're probably not, but I thought it was fun. We had 34 skirts smoothed. We had 17 shawls adjusted. We had 10 hat or caps resettled. We had 8 braid tugs. We had 2 buttons twisted. We had 1 glove smoothed. We had 1 necklace adjusted and 1 cloak gathered. I just thought it was so much fun to sort of keep track of that, and I think I will do that in the next book, book 9, which I will have coming up before too long. More about that later, though. So the world that our characters find themselves in by book 8 is in quite a bit of chaos. It's difficult to know who they can trust, right? You know, who you can trust. And I think that's actually true for us in our lives too, right? But anyway, it's very difficult to not to get consumed by worry about the future, about things that might happen. And so there's several in the quotes here in the book where the characters use these different quotes. They're using these different quotes to remind themselves to keep focused on the immediate task at hand. As the saying goes in the Wheel of Time, the wheel weaves as the wheel wills. Yes, it does. So the first quote I have here is, "Peel the apple in your hand, girl, not the one in the tree." Lenny's thin voice seemed to whisper in her ear, "Tears are for after. They just waste time before." She's telling, the character Lenny's telling this other character, worry about your work that you have to do right now, that's right before you. Then there's another quote that says, You hammered the iron that lay on your anvil instead of daydreaming about working silver." Meaning, again, you do the work that's in front of you with the materials that you have to work with, not what you wish you had to work with. So I thought that was pretty cool. But then there's a caution here against looking too closely at only what's right in front of you. And the quote is, "It isn't the stone you see that trips you on your nose." To me, this means looking far enough ahead that you don't trip on something coming at you, but nevertheless not looking so far into the future that you're worrying about different possibilities that haven't occurred yet and may never occur. There's another quote that I really like about secrets. So the quote says, "A secret spoken finds wings." That had been another of Lenny's many favorites. I think that's so cool. Then there's this quote here about pride, which I really liked, and how pride can get in our way so many times. The quote says, "The main thing Karuna Nakaman must learn is that she owns her own pride. It does not own her. She will be a very strong woman once she learns that." So this character needs to learn that she has control of her pride and how she uses it and how she lets it impact her life. Her pride doesn't have to control her. And I just love that. And then I love this quote about oaths. So in a chaotic world, I think we as readers live in one, right? Too, as well as the characters in this book. It's a chaotic world. It's in a chaotic world such as theirs and ours, I think it's important to have an ethical framework, that you can structure your life on. And I think humans in general have to have a structure of this kind. And lacking an ethical one, many times I think humans in history have latched on their structure onto other less ethical systems like political ideologies, political parties, political movements, and things like that. But I digress. Our character here in the Path of Daggers says, "I realized that I had to hold on to the oaths with somebody, or I'd lose myself completely. So I don't lie to you or to Gareth Bryn, whatever it costs. And as soon as I can, Mother, I will swear the 3 oaths on the oath rod again." So this particular character is one of the Aes Sedai, and they have these things called oath rods. It's kind of a long story, but this particular character is no longer bound by the oaths of the oath rod. So she's outside that ethical system that she frames her life around, right? And so one of their key sort of tenets is that they do not lie. Aes Sedai do not lie. They may bend to the truth or say the truth in tricky ways, but they don't ever outright lie. But she, again, is not connected. But it has sort of unmoored her from her sense of ethics, I think, here. So I thought that was really interesting. Finally, weaving the pattern. Weaving the pattern of reality is a common theme throughout all of the books, and some characters have more influence on the pattern that the wheel weaves than others do, and some have quite a bit of pattern, actually bend the weave to their will. And that's a whole different story. I've actually mentioned that on some of the previous videos. There's a couple of quotes here, though, about the pattern and our impact on it. And the first quote says, "Whether or not what you do has the effect you want, it will have 3 at least you never expected. And one of those, usually unpleasant." Meaning unintended consequences. Actions always seem to have them. And very often, at least one of the unintended consequences is not very pleasant many times. And the wheel does indeed weave as it wills, right? So I think this quote's really saying, our actions, we can maybe predict our actions and the immediate impact, but we can't really impact the other actions that are also contributing to the weave, the actions of everyone around us, right? Finally, there's one more quote that I loved about the pattern and weaving the pattern, and it says, "Across the nations, the stories spread like spiderweb laid upon spiderweb, and men and women planned the future, believing they knew the truth. They planned, and the pattern absorbed their plans, weaving toward the future foretold." So due to the people feel like they understand what is going on, right? And so using that understanding, they act on that. And that in turn then impacts the weave. So I think that was really interesting. Okay, I think I will leave the chat there. I love Path of Daggers. I love this series, and I will continue reading on in the series. I do have book 9 at least planned for this year, and possibly book 10. So I will have at least book 9 in a chat coming up yet at some point this year, not too far in the future probably. However, my next chat is actually going to be The Divine Comedy by Dante, which I have finished already, so I will have a chat on it coming up soon. Until next time, take care.